When Caroline Hales returned to Brindlement, the land felt older than she remembered. It was not the age measured by years or seasons, but the kind that settles into soil like a stain and seeps into the bones of a place until it refuses to let go. The Appalachian foothills loomed like hunched silhouettes under a sky that never fully brightened, and the fields stretched endlessly, empty in a way that felt intentional. Her car struggled up the final incline toward the northern stretch of town, its headlights cutting through the soft mist that clung to the valley floor. The mist always lingered in Brindlement, as though the land exhaled something it never wanted others to see. And the deeper she drove, the stronger her unease grew, creeping up her spine with every passing mile marker. Her father's death was abrupt, the kind of sudden ending that leaves a jagged tear in a life rather than a clean break. A stroke, the doctors said, though the sheriff hinted that he'd been acting strangely for months. Forgetting things, muttering to himself, wandering the fields after sundown. The sheriff chalked it up to age. Caroline wasn't so sure. When the farmhouse appeared in her headlights, she felt the old, familiar tightening in her stomach. The structure stood at the end of a long gravel drive, half swallowed by overgrown pines whose branches twisted into unnatural shapes. It looked exactly as it always had. A two-story colonial relic, its paint chipped, its porch sagging, its windows reflecting nothing but darkness. Caroline parked beside the rusted tractor near the barn and remained in the car for several minutes. The night felt heavier here, as though the air itself resisted her presence. But eventually she forced herself out and approached the front door, remembering how many times she had crossed this threshold as a child, always with a sense of unease she could never name. Inside, the house greeted her with silence thick enough to feel tangible. Dust coated the floorboards, and the stale scent of old cedar mingled with something sharper, a faint metallic smell that seemed to grow stronger near the staircase. She flicked on the light. The bulbs flickered reluctantly, illuminating peeling wallpaper, warped wood, and the familiar shadow stretching across the hall. Her shadow, except it didn't stop where it should have. For a fraction of a second, it lagged behind, moving differently from her body, as though adjusting itself a moment too late. She exhaled sharply and shut the door. The first night passed slowly. She struggled to sleep, listening to the groans of the old house and the distant rustle of the wind through dead branches. But underlying everything was a softer sound, a faint rhythmic tapping, like footsteps pacing across wooden boards. She forced herself to ignore it. At dawn, she began sorting her father's belongings. The journals were the first thing that truly unsettled her. They filled an entire drawer in his study, each meticulously dated and organized. The early entries were mundane, but gradually the tone shifted. He wrote about the road, about the nights he couldn't sleep because something kept circling the house, about fields where footprints appeared in perfect lines, only to vanish when touched, about headlights following him on the crooked road that disappeared the moment he looked in the rearview mirror. Caroline read for hours, her unease growing with every page. He mentioned her brother too, the brother she had spent her life trying to forget. He had vanished when she was 12, swallowed by the crooked road on a warm August night. No body was ever found. No clues. No explanation. Her father's words suggested he had never stopped searching, and that something on that road had found him instead. By late afternoon, Caroline stepped outside to breathe. But the world outside felt no more comforting. The wind stilled abruptly. The pines stopped their rustling. And she noticed something odd. The gravel in the driveway bore deep tire marks leading out toward the main road. Someone had driven here recently and not long ago. She glanced at her father's truck, still locked in the barn. The tire tracks did not match his truck. She kneels, touches the gravel. The indentations are fresh. Someone had visited the house, or the house had been visited by something else entirely. As evening fell, she discovered something worse. The basement door was open. Her father had always kept it locked. Always. The stairs descended into absolute darkness. The air drifting up felt colder than winter air, colder than natural. And the faint metallic scent she'd noticed earlier was stronger here, almost nauseating. She stepped back and shut the door firmly. She wedged a chair under the handle, though she had no explanation for why that felt necessary. Night approached quickly, and with night came the tapping. Not from the roof, not from the hallway, from beneath the floorboards. Measured, slow, deliberate. She tried to distract herself with more of her father's journals. But the deeper she read, the more the dread gathered around her like a storm preparing to break. He wrote of hearing whispers in the walls, not loud enough to understand but too clear to dismiss as pipes or settling wood. He wrote of dreams where he wandered the crooked road for hours only to wake standing in the fields with dirt under his nails. He wrote of something he called the Watcher on the Bend, a figure he had first seen after her brother disappeared. Tall, indistinct, always lurking in the corner of his vision, as if observing him from just beyond the edge of light. And then the entries changed abruptly. One night, he wrote that he heard footsteps outside his bedroom door. He opened it, but the hallway was empty, except for a single footprint on the floor. Bare, muddy, a small child's print. Her father hadn't gone insane. He had been afraid. And for the first time in years, Caroline felt something she had buried long ago. The memory of waking in the night as a teenager, convinced someone was standing in her room, watching her from the darkest corner. She used to think it was childish imagination. Now she wasn't so sure. Her second night in the house was worse. At 2:13 a.m., she woke to the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. She froze. The house was silent again, but the air felt colder. Her breath came out in faint clouds. Slowly, she forced herself out of bed and stepped into the hallway. Her shadow stretched unnaturally long across the wall. She stood still, watching it. It flickered at the edges like a flame struggling to stay lit. Then it bent. Not slightly, not naturally. It bent sharply, bending at a point where her body had not moved at all. She stumbled backward and nearly fell. Her shadow straightened again, but now it stood just a fraction too tall. Caroline retreated into her room and did not sleep. By morning, she realized something else was wrong. The driveway held new prints, not footprints but drag marks, as if something heavy had been pulled from the woods toward the house. The marks vanished abruptly near the porch steps, leaving no explanation for what had been dragged or where it had gone. The metallic scent was outside now too, like the earth itself had bled during the night. She tried going into town, hoping for normalcy, but people reacted strangely when they saw her. Some avoided her. Some stared too long. One elderly woman on the sidewalk froze entirely, clutching her shopping bag as if seeing a ghost. It wasn't until she stepped into the grocery store that she heard two residents whispering behind her. "She shouldn't have come back," one murmured. "The road remembers its own," the other whispered back. Caroline left her groceries behind. The drive home took longer again. The road twisted in ways she did not recognize. Twice she turned around, convinced she had passed the same dead oak tree more than once. And each time she glanced in the rearview mirror, she saw a dark shape on the horizon behind her. Unmoving, tall, featureless. Once home, she searched for the journals again, desperate for explanation. She dug deeper into the drawer and found an entry dated 3 weeks before her father's death. Everything changed with this entry. "I saw him today. Not a memory, not a dream. Him, my boy, standing in the road. He didn't look older. He didn't look younger. He didn't look alive. The road kept him, just like it will keep her if she comes back." Caroline slammed the journal shut, heart pounding. The shadow of a child. The reflection of something that looked like her brother but wasn't. The road that took him. The watcher on the bend. Her father's decline. Everything circled the same truth she did not want to face. If the road had taken her brother, could take again. Night fell faster this time. Too fast. And with darkness came the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Not from the windows, not from the hallway, from beneath the floorboards where the tapping began again. Slower this time, more deliberate, as though whatever waited below was attempting a message. The temperature dropped, the lights dimmed, her shadow lengthened again, detaching from her feet by inches now. Then something scratched at the basement door. Once, twice, 3 slow drags of something rough against wood. Caroline backed away, shaking. Then a sound came that made every hair on her body rise. A small child's laugh, faint and distant, drifting up through the floor. She ran upstairs, locked her bedroom door, and clutched her father's journal to her chest. And then she read the final sentence he ever wrote. "Beware the night the shadow steps ahead of you. That is the night the road comes for you too." And as she stared at the wall opposite her bed, her shadow slowly stepped forward, separating from her entirely. She gasped, paused, turned its head though it had no face. Then it lifted an arm and pointed toward the window facing the crooked road. The road was calling again. But this time it wasn't just calling. It was waiting. What followed in the days after the discovery of the charred cabin became a blur of overlapping events, each more unsettling than the last. The authorities officially classified the case as under investigation, but the town of Willow Harbor didn't need paperwork to confirm what it already felt in its bones. Something ancient and wrong had stirred, and the ground beneath this place was no longer steady. Caroline tried to keep herself grounded by returning to her routines, yet every small task felt hollow. The grocery aisles seemed narrower. The parking lots felt too open. Even the sound of her own footsteps echoed strangely in her ears, as if someone else was walking alongside her just barely out of sight. At night, she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the words of the deputy who warned her not to trust anyone, especially not the people closest to her. She didn't tell anyone what she had found in the cabin. Not the symbols carved into the floorboards. Not the old photographs depicting ritual gatherings. Not the fact that her own mother, decades younger, appeared in one of them. Standing at the edge of a circle lit by torches, her expression unreadable. Caroline had burned through every ounce of denial she had left. Whatever her mother had been tied to, whatever legacy Caroline had unknowingly inherited, it was still alive, and it was watching her. One evening, just as the sun dipped behind the pines, she caught the unmistakable shape of a figure standing at the edge of the tree-line near her backyard. She froze, clutching the glass of water she was holding. The figure did not move. It did not step closer or step back. It simply stood there, as if absorbing the last light of the day, its silhouette long and lean. When a passing car's headlights briefly illuminated the yard, the figure vanished, not by stepping away, but as though it had never been there at all. Caroline called the sheriff's office. No one answered. The line rang and rang until the voicemail kicked in, the silence before the beep feeling somehow staged. That night, she couldn't fight the urge to read deeper into the journals she had taken from the cabin. Most of them were written in a mixture of local slang and archaic phrases, but one entry stood out because of how plainly it read. It spoke of a pact formed over a century ago, around the time the first settlers reached Willow Harbor. The pact, apparently, was meant to protect the town from the curse of forgetting. Caroline didn't know what that meant, but the journal elaborated that the price of the pact was memory itself, taken, borrowed, and exchanged. The more she read, the more the words burrowed under her skin. There were mentions of chosen heirs, of keepers of the silence, and of the returning circle, a gathering that took place once every 33 years. According to the notes, the last gathering had occurred 19 years ago, which meant another one was approaching. One line in particular made Caroline's breath stall. When the circle awakens, the air begins to dream. She hadn't dreamed properly in weeks. Only fragments, flashes. A glimpse of her mother walking into the woods, a hand reaching toward Caroline's crib, the scent of burning cedar. Were those dreams or memories? As days passed, Caroline noticed a strange pattern emerging. Random people in town began approaching her with overly familiar expressions, as if they knew her intimately. The mailman told her he remembered her from his childhood, though he was at least 20 years older than she was. The barista claimed Caroline had once lived in her house before moving back. None of them were aggressive, but each interaction left Caroline's skin crawling. They weren't confusing her with someone else. They genuinely believed she had always been here, and that, more than anything, terrified her. One afternoon, while driving along the narrow mountain road toward the lake, Caroline spotted a familiar truck in her rearview mirror. It was the deputy's vehicle, the same deputy who had warned her the night of the fire. She slowed slightly, hoping he would pull alongside her, but instead he kept a steady distance behind her, maintaining the same speed. The longer she drove, the more she realized he wasn't trying to catch up. He was escorting her, or shadowing her. The tension built until Caroline abruptly pulled off onto a small gravel turnout. The deputy slowed but did not stop. He merely watched her as he passed, meeting her gaze with an unreadable expression, then drove on as though nothing had happened. The message was clear. Someone had told him to keep her in sight. The sense of being hunted without being touched, tracked without being accused, seeped into every part of her day. Then came the storm. A violent, sudden downpour hit the region with such force that the roads flooded within minutes. Lightning split the sky in jagged white veins. Caroline had taken shelter in her mother's old house, which she had been avoiding since returning to Willow Harbor. The house sat at the top of a gentle hill overlooking the lake, its windows tall and narrow, like watchful eyes. Inside, everything was exactly as her mother had left it. The faint smell of lavender and wood polish lingered in the air. A photo album sat open on the dining table. The page displayed an image Caroline didn't recognize. It depicted a group of townspeople laughing near the lake during a summer fair. And there, among them, stood her mother, and a girl who looked exactly like Caroline at age 10. But Caroline had never attended such a fair. She knew that with absolute certainty. As she studied the photo, she felt the floorboards shift slightly beneath her feet, as if something in the house had exhaled. She looked toward the hallway and caught sight of a shadow slipping behind the corner, moving with unnerving purpose. She thought, for a moment, that her mind was tricking her, until she heard footsteps overhead. Slow, measured, deliberate. The storm gave the illusion that the house was breathing. But this sound was real. Caroline grabbed the nearest object she could find, a brass candlestick, and moved toward the staircase. Each step groaned under her weight. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched long and dim, illuminated only by flashes of lightning outside the windows. She followed the noise toward her mother's old bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open, heart hammering. The room was dark, but she could feel, not see, the presence of someone standing near the dresser. Lightning illuminated the room for a split second, revealing a tall figure facing away from her, shoulders tense, head slightly tilted as if listening to her breaths. The next flash showed the same figure, but now standing inches closer. Caroline couldn't scream. She backed away slowly, but the floor creaked beneath her, and the figure turned. Only there was no face, just shifting darkness, as though the storm outside had taken shape inside the house. Caroline bolted, the candlestick clattering to the floor. She sprinted down the stairs as thunder shook the walls. She didn't stop running until she reached her car, fumbling with her keys, slamming the door shut and peeling away from the house. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her hands trembling so violently she could barely grip the steering wheel. As she reached the main road, her headlights illuminated something lying in the middle of the street. It was the same journal from the cabin, the one she had hidden in her own home, miles away. It lay open, drenched in rain, as if someone had placed it there deliberately. Caroline slowed, staring through the windshield at the soaked pages. Lightning struck again, and another shape appeared just beyond the book, standing at the tree line. A silhouette, watching her. Not the faceless figure from the house, but unmistakably human. A woman. Caroline blinked rain from her eyes, confused, terrified. The figure stepped forward just enough for the light to catch her features. It was her mother, older, weathered, alive, and smiling as though this meeting had been planned for years.